What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Coinist Podcast. I have a killer show for you today as Bitcoin approaches all-time highs. You have price right now at $17,700. That means there's been less than 10 days where Bitcoin has ever traded this high. Going back to 2017, we peaked out at 20K. There were less than 7 or 8 days where we actually traded this high, where we are currently. And Bloomberg just posted an article that said no one is talking about this Bitcoin rally. So which one is it? Is everyone talking about it? Is everyone buying? Or is no one talking about it? What's causing this run up? Well, I break that down in today's show. I have 4 distinct groups of who's buying Bitcoin. You have billionaires, you have the institutional buyers, you have this flood of retail coming in. I have charts to prove it. And then we also have a redenomination into Bitcoin. So I want you guys to stick around and see all that. We're breaking down everything you need to know. If you're invested in Bitcoin, if you're trading Bitcoin, if you're just watching it as it rises to 20K, I think you guys will enjoy this show. I want to say one thing before I start though. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button right down below. Smash the like button if you're enjoying this Bitcoin run. And if you're listening on iTunes and Spotify, that's always available. Hit the subscribe button there. A ton of good guests coming on. We just had an epic show last week. Download numbers are at all-time highs, so I appreciate you guys listening. Let's get to the show. I'll see you guys right after the intro. All right, so I'm going to kick this thing off with Bloomberg's article, and they published this today. This is on the 16th, or I guess I should say yesterday, as I'm recording this on the 17th on Tuesday. They published an article and they said Bitcoin's gunning for a record and no one's talking about it. Now, if you go down and look at what they actually wrote, I don't necessarily disagree that less people are talking about it, but I think they missed the point because retail is buying. And I'm going to show you the charts from Square Crypto. I'm going to show you the volumes coming in from PayPal. But regardless, I think they do have a point. This rise has been less euphoric. Less people are incredibly excited. There's a lot less talk about 30K, 50K, 100K. Those numbers and predictions are starting to come out, but definitely less hype this time around. And it has some people, it kind of makes me laugh because they're asking fixed income strategists and portfolio managers that focus on other assets, but they kind of have a point. They said the fascination with it has worn off. You have hardcore cryptocurrency investor group, but that really hasn't expanded. You have another prominent Wall Street analyst, and he's saying it's kind of in the shadows, and it's basically because stocks have done so well, and the people that used to be very excited about it have worn off, maybe because they got crushed as Bitcoin, dropped in 2018, 2019, and the beginning of this year. So some of those people got burned so badly, they're less excited about it now. And I don't necessarily think that's wrong, but I do want to point out and highlight with this show that they are missing, there are giant swaths of retail coming in. There are giant groups of institutional investors that used to brush this off and simply can't anymore. Some of them have come out and said they're buyers. I'm going to go to that next, but I want to get to this point first, in that Bloomberg might be missing the point. Yes, there is less hype, less euphoria, less calls for 50K and 100K, right? This isn't the first time Bitcoin's been here. So I guess you have a lot of investors and a lot of traders acting like you've been there before, because we actually have. We've only been this high for 10 or so days, but I think all the people that are still invested in Bitcoin and still focused on it, still spend a lot of time researching it, all of those people have such conviction that we should be at least here or higher, that the hype is just not as much as it was. I don't think that's a bad thing. But regardless of sentiment, right? Sentiment does matter. You need people talking about Bitcoin and encouraged by it and optimistic about it. You need people quite bullish on the entire crypto space in general for these coins to do well, right? Sentiment does play a role, but what's more important right now, right? Let's say we aren't hyped. Let's say Bloomberg is correct and that no one's talking about it. What's more important then is who's buying. Who is driving this rally? Why are we going higher? I'm going to break it down in 4 distinct groups, and I want to start with the billionaires, some of the most famous and well-performing investors historically ever, right? Some of the best performing hedge fund managers have come out. They might have been against Bitcoin in the past, but slowly, gradually, and then suddenly, they're all jumping on board the Bitcoin ship. This was from Stan Druckenmiller just last week. Here's what he had to say.
I'm a bit of a dinosaur, but I have warmed up to the fact that Bitcoin could be an asset class. It has a lot of attraction to it as a store of value to both millennials and the new West Coast money. It's been around for 13 years, and with each passing day, it picks up more of its stabilization of a brand. But frankly, if the gold bet works, the Bitcoin bet will probably work better because it's thinner and more liquid and has a lot more beta to it.
All right, so that was Stan Druckenmiller on CNBC just last week. And I want to give that clip a little bit of context for people that are unfamiliar with who Stan is, and then also highlight one really important thing he said towards the end. Stan Druckenmiller is one of the best performing hedge fund managers ever. And he did it in the macro space, meaning he tries to envision a world or a thesis or a scenario where he sees which currencies are going to do best or which group of equities globally are going to do best or if gold will do best in the next 5 to 10 years. And his fund averaged 30% annual returns while it was open. He since closed down that fund and he just managed a family office and invests for himself. But Stan, regardless, without debate, one of the best hedge fund managers of all time. Now, him coming out and saying this matches his thesis being that the money printing is going to cause currencies like the US dollar to maybe decline in the next 5 to 10 years. I think a lot of Bitcoiners hold that view as well. But this is important because this isn't a stock picker coming out and saying Bitcoin's going to do well because, X valuation. This isn't someone coming out and saying this is just a momentum play. I'm going to buy Bitcoin because it's going up fast. If the gold bet works, this matches his thesis, his worldview of where we're going to be in 5 to 10 years, that if the gold bet works, right, the inflation trade, if currencies continue to depreciate because we're printing too much, then the gold bet would work. But if the gold bet works, he says, the Bitcoin bet should work better. That's pretty wild to hear from one of the best investors of all time. It matches his thesis. This isn't a short-term thing. This isn't a jump in, get out thing. This isn't just because we're going to all-time highs thing. This is his thesis for the next 5 to 10 years. And the other thing I want to highlight with this, if you're ever watching billionaires start buying Bitcoin, you say, yeah, but how much of an impact does that actually have? I think it's really important to differentiate the impact of one billionaire buying versus what that means for the rest of the investment community. It continues to lower the career risk for other hedge fund managers, other analysts, other Wall Street traditional analysts, other financial advisors that were maybe too scared to dip their toes in and say Bitcoin's too risky. I don't know, not enough people are doing it. What if it goes to zero? What if I look dumb? When the smartest investors in the world are coming out and saying it matches their thesis, you have to take a look, and you're also much less reluctant to actually initiate that buy. So I think it's another one of those dominoes of these massive buyers. We're not even at the institutional buyers yet. I'm going to get to that next. But these billionaire buyers, the biggest hedge funds in the world, I think are going to continue making news like this on CNBC, on Bloomberg, wherever they are. They're going to keep going on TV. They're going to say they're buying Bitcoin because, look, it's all the same trade. And if that trade works out, Bitcoin should be the best mover. All right, so with the billionaires out of the way, let's get to that second group of who is buying right now. Who is causing this crazy run up in Bitcoin where we continue to rise 1%, 2%, 5% every single day, and it's the institutional buyers. And you've probably heard that before. Institutions are coming, but this year it actually is different. The custody solutions have been figured out. You have on-ramps and infrastructure built out that just wasn't there yet, and Grayscale, which runs the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, now holds almost $10 billion of crypto, and this last week, this was published 2 days ago, was their biggest inflow ever. It was the largest capital raise week of all time, said Michael Sunnestein, who's the managing director at Grayscale, and they raised $260 million in Bitcoin on Thursday, $115 million in Bitcoin in one day. That means Grayscale is now one of the biggest purchasers of Bitcoin, and their total investments are almost 2% of Bitcoin's entire market cap. And as if that's not bullish enough, $115 million worth of Bitcoin bought in one day with Grayscale, you might say, well, that's a one-off. It's only Grayscale that's doing that well. I'm going to point you to this, and this is Anthony Scaramucci's fund, Skybridge Capital. They manage about $3.5 billion. They just filed a form with the SEC, and they're looking to start investing in Bitcoin. They obviously want to be able to go long and short, but I think it shows it's a serious rush for large funds to be able to invest in this thing. You can see it with Grayscale with their record inflows, and you can also see it with seriously notable funds. These are funds managing billions of dollars, not 10 million, not 100 million, billion-dollar funds, racing to get the form submitted and understand and be able to buy and participate in this Bitcoin bull run. So there's another institution, if you didn't have enough evidence just with Grayscale, Anthony Scaramucci and Skybridge, that's another pretty big one. Okay, so two groups out of the way, billionaire investors, everyone knows who they are. You have the institutions, and those narratives, those people go on CNBC, on Bloomberg, you're going to see them on the news. They make headlines. But the third group is probably the most important, and this is the group that Bloomberg said isn't here yet. No one's talking about it. Everyone's saying that retail is not here yet, but I have some stats and some charts that's going to show different. And the PayPal news and the Cash App are probably two ways that retail or individuals are buying Bitcoin. You remember PayPal just announced recently they're going to let investors buy Bitcoin and ETH and Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash. I don't know why Bitcoin Cash, but they are. And that news was massive, right? 300 million people that use PayPal can now buy Bitcoin. Well, that timeline got bumped up a little bit, and now those individuals are able to buy Bitcoin right there on PayPal. So the question is, how many people are actually buying it? And thankfully, someone did the legwork for me. Hunter Mergart, who's the head of US at Bitstamp, he previously worked at Coinbase, he looked at how many people were actually buying Bitcoin through PayPal. And the way that you can see that is Paxos, or Itbit, is their liquidity provider, and you can see how much volume that exchange was doing. They were doing around 3 million a day before the PayPal launch. Now they're averaging 10 to 15 million, 20 million a day, and that number is going parabolic. So people actually are buying on PayPal, even if you say that's not real Bitcoin. There does have to be Bitcoin bought by PayPal or by BitGo, who custodies their Bitcoin, so that the users can own that Bitcoin on the PayPal app. I know some people heard about the PayPal news and they said, this isn't that bullish, people should buy their own coins. But this is actually translating to real buying pressure, to real demand in the Bitcoin market, and you can see it right here with the Itbit trading volume showing you how many of those 350 million users on PayPal are actually logging in and buying Bitcoin. The retail bid is there on PayPal. Now let's go to Cash App. And the reason that I want to look at the Cash App data, this method of Bitcoin buying is exclusively for individuals. There aren't institutions, there aren't hedge funds logging into a Cash App on your iPhone to buy their Bitcoin. So when you look at volumes from Square's Cash App just to buy Bitcoin, you can confidently say that's from individuals, that's from retail. How much of this bid is actually retail? These Cash App numbers are going to give us a really good clue there. And if you look at Cash App's data from the third quarter of 2020, compare that to the second quarter of 2020, where we did $875 million of Bitcoin sales. It's now at $1.6 billion. And even going back to quarter one of 2020, it was only 300 million. So it's almost doubling every single quarter the Bitcoin purchases. As price is rising, the retail bid is there. Meaning, even if institutions and billionaire investors are playing a larger role in this rally, there is actually serious retail demand almost 2 times over each quarter. Stepping in on the PayPal app, that's relatively new, but on the Cash App, it shows that doubling interest from retail investors to be buying Bitcoin right there on their iPhones. That shows a really serious retail bid that even if those investors aren't hyped or euphoric or aren't making as much noise this time around, they are still coming in droves, and that's something that a lot of people might miss when they read that Bloomberg headline or only hear about institutions getting in. There are a lot of individuals and retail interest getting in as well, maybe not making up as big of a percentage during the 2017 rally, but they are coming, and they're coming in droves. They're coming 2 times more each quarter to buy their Bitcoin right there on the Cash App. And on PayPal, I expect we see those numbers to follow a similar trajectory as what we see right here. So a quick recap. We have the billionaire investors. These are investors that you know. Ray Dalio potentially coming around on Bitcoin. Stan Druckenmiller coming around on Bitcoin. You have institutions. Skybridge filing forms with the SEC to be able to buy Bitcoin. You have Grayscale Investment Bitcoin Trust getting record inflows. Now even retail is here. The retail bid is here. Even if it's quiet, it's not as euphoric this time. The PayPal app and the Cash App show that we are still seeing record inflows of retail and seriously high retail participation. Now, the fourth group is something that I had not considered, or even if I thought about it, didn't give much weight to it until I had a guest on the show this last week. And the guest was Kyle Davies. He's the co-founder of Three Arrows Capital, one of the largest Bitcoin funds out there in Singapore. They've made some seriously good calls. They call their shots in advance. They're right a lot of the time. And when I asked him, what else is happening? What else is driving this Bitcoin run, right? Why are other alts kind of faltering while Bitcoin does this well? We've seen this in the past where Bitcoin does well and alts get hurt, but is there something deeper there, right? What's causing crypto native investors to sell their alts or give up hope on some of their alts and move it into Bitcoin? And he called it the great redenomination into Bitcoin. Here's what Kyle Davies had to say. You talked about this year being the year of the Bitcoin redenomination. What does that mean in a couple sentences? I'm trying to understand what that word means.
I think people got hurt in crypto, 2018 to 2019, right? And I think that there was a time basically where you would have all of your coins in Bitcoin, and then you would use that as collateral to trade other things, for example, on BitMEX. And I think over the past 3 years, that kind of got flushed out. So people kind of changed their mentality to holding more dollars or stablecoin and using that as collateral to trade whatever they wanted to trade, right? Sure. And they would go into alts and then they'd sell back into dollars or whatever. And I think that was maybe even perhaps the right thing to do for the past couple of years. But you can be reminded that that is not the long-term best thing to do when BTC is on a big DOM run. And I think that's part of what like Bitcoin for me is a confluence of a couple different things. Why it's an interesting trade right now. One is the macro environment. Two is like crypto native investors coming in for their own reasons, whether it's a treasury allocation or whatever. But a third would be crypto native people that have forgotten you're supposed to hold a lot of Bitcoin. That decided that stable coins were the right thing to hold, and they are being treated to a proper proper treatment.
So there you have it. All four groups of people playing a massive role in this Bitcoin run-up. If you're watching the price and saying, who the hell is buying right here? How are we running up so fast? Compare it to 2017, we aren't having 20% drawdowns. We've only had 10% drawdowns, but this has been one of the steadiest climbs in Bitcoin's history. Over the past 73 days, we're up 73%. And if you keep asking yourself, is this thing going to drop? Or is the floor going to get pulled? Is Bitcoin going to have a 50% retracement? Are we going back to 10K? Is all-time highs coming too fast? No one can predict the future, but hopefully with this quick episode of the Coinist Podcast, you understand the four distinct groups of people that are driving this move. I know that sentiment plays a big role, but I think Bloomberg and some investors are missing the point. Yes, we aren't as euphoric right now. It's very good to have positive sentiment. It's good to have people optimistic about Bitcoin. I think they're here. They're just a little bit more quiet this time because everyone that stuck around has conviction that we should be this high or much higher. The billionaire investors that are stepping in, the institutions that are coming in droves, the retail bid that is here, even if you don't see it, it's on the PayPal and Cash App, and also a redenomination into Bitcoin, as Kyle Davies said, from crypto investors that forgot how parabolic, how explosive Bitcoin can be as they shift their holdings from Tether and other alts into Bitcoin. All four of those groups playing a massive role as Bitcoin rips to 17K today. Hopefully the next episode's at all-time highs, but if you guys enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe right down below on YouTube, or if you're listening on iTunes and Spotify, hit the subscribe button there. Hope you guys join me as I continue pushing out more episodes, having on hedge fund managers, analysts, investors, traders, getting their opinion on where we're going, looking at ways you can profit off this market, because the bull run's a lot of fun, right? Whether you're an investor, you just like watching prices go up, or you're a trader, you're looking for the swings, I'm going to cover it right here. You're in the right spot. So I appreciate you guys tuning in today. I'll see you on the next show.